Welcome from COP26 here in Glasgow. Really glad that you can join us today. Not sure where you are in the world, but hopefully we're going to have some very interesting discussion with my fellow panelists here, all around the topic of how do we build back better? What will it take to achieve a zero carbon sustainable African economy? So this is a joint event here held at COP26 with fellow organizations, Sustainable Energy Africa and the World Future Council. I represent REN21, a multi-stakeholder network. One thing we all have we're built around different, we have different players. We reach out in different ways in our work. But the one thing that definitely unites us as organizations is that we are united in our belief of the role of renewables in achieving a sustainable and equitable society. So that's really the unifying theme for this event today. This event is being held here in Glasgow at COP26. And just a little bit of trivia to get us started. 97% of the electricity here in Scotland is generated from renewables, which is a fantastic start. But for any of you who have come through Glasgow Central Station, you've definitely smelled the diesel fumes. So while we've got the really high shares of renewables in the power sector, there's still some work to be done in getting those renewables both into the transport and then heating and cooling sectors. And it's clear that we need to start addressing this issue more sustainably if we're really serious about these discussions around zero carbon and what it takes to get to that. And that's really going to be the focus of today's event. You know, what is needed to achieve zero carbon? We've selected Africa as our focus. It's a continent that has vast resources, energy resources, both fossil fuel and renewables. And it also has huge potential for innovation, economic development, creation of new sectors, and of course, a growing and engaged young population that really can help drive this energy transition. So I'd like to turn and introduce our panelists today. I have three panelists here. I have my first panelist is Honorable Lawrence Songa from Uganda, a parliamentarian. We have also Samia Said, who is a young professional coming to us from Sudan, and Leah Renalda, REN21, who works on city. So we have a nice cross-section. We have from the national perspective, from the city perspective, and from the citizens' perspective. But before we begin our panel discussion today, we are going to frame this discussion around a presentation given by a fellow colleague, Joel Nana, from Sustainable Energy Africa, who is going to give a short presentation to really frame what is the current situation with regards to renewables today on the African continent.
Hi everyone, my name is Joel Nana and I work for Sustainable Energy Africa, an NGO based in South Africa. So in just 3 slides, I'm going to give you a quick snapshot of the state of renewables in Africa and the challenges thereof. So in 2018, the total installed capacity was sitting around 244 gigawatt for a total electricity generation of 870 terawatt hour. For both installed capacity and electricity generation, renewables made up between 18 to 20% of the mix. But actually that varies quite significantly across the regions. For example, in Sub-Saharan Africa, excluding South Africa, electricity generation mostly comes from hydro. Meanwhile, in North Africa, it mostly comes from gas. On electricity generation, renewables hasn't really increased that much in the mix between 2010 and 2018. I think it just increased by about 2%, but that's because of the large investment that rather went into gas. But when actually you take renewables on its own, it's a different picture. Between 2010 and 2018, electricity generation from renewables alone increased by about 42%, which I think is quite a significant achievement that needs to be acknowledged. at city level, there hasn't been quite a lot of there hasn't been a lot of work there, and for the simple reason that traditionally work in the energy space happens at the national level and regional level. Because as we know, cities don't have the technical capacity, talk less of the mandates and powers to engage in this space. But things have changed quite significantly since COP21. There's been a significant growth in momentum around the role of cities in driving the transition, and that has given birth to quite a few initiatives like the Covenant of Mayors or the C40 Climate Action Planning Program that have really empowered the cities to drive the transition. And through these initiatives, we see a couple of cities, like 19 in Sub-Saharan Africa and 9 in North Africa, that have committed to driving renewable energy uptake and set renewable energy targets. So the way cities are really envisaging to drive this transition is mostly around distributed renewables on commercial, industrial, and residential facilities, and also PPAs like in South Africa, and to a lesser extent large-scale utility renewables. In South Africa, for example, where they've been tracking distributed renewables for the past while, you'll notice that the total installed capacity from distributed renewables just on commercial and residential facilities alone is already around 282 megawatt, which shows how cities are really working, for example, in South Africa, to drive the transition. Concluding with the challenges. So these are obviously the challenges that we all know. For example, around financing, there's limited access to funding. Actually, when you take the investment that has come into the continent on renewables compared to the rest of the world, I think the continent only got about 1 or 2% of that share, which is quite insignificant. On the policy side or regulatory side, you also have issues, for example, around the PPAs. Like, it's not usually very clear how governments enter into contractual agreements with independent power producers, and when the governments change, there's usually this breach of contracts. And on the technical side, we obviously know there is usually not that much capacity to understand the transition and even the right infrastructure in place for that transition. And so I will not go into the details of all this, and I will leave you to discuss, but I will leave you with just 2 thoughts, and these are my thoughts on how we can genuinely drive or support renewables in the continent. So just 4 points. The first one, there needs to be a proper framework around building the capacity of grid operators in the region. 2, we need to acknowledge, or we need to support the development or the deployment of whatever backup power is available or suitable for every country. It could be hydro, it could be geothermal, it could even be gas, and obviously storage. 3, we need to put a priority on transmission network between countries, and even supporting the integration of regional pools. And lastly, and the one which is really dear to my heart, is African countries or even cities need to work together with the investors and put a clause that whatever investments come into renewable, it needs to be bundled with investment in grid upgrade, because we know we don't have yet the infrastructure to support high shares of renewables, and so we need the investors to also commit to upgrading the infrastructure on top of building additional renewable energy sources. So on that, I wish you an exciting discussion further, and thank you.
Thank you, Joel. I know you're listening out there in the ethosphere. Thank you very much for that presentation. I'm now going to turn to our panelists. I want to know, I'm curious to hear what you thought the one point that sort of struck you, or you know, sort of what stood out for you in that presentation. And I'm going to start at the far end here, Leah. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, please.
Many thanks, Laura, and also warm welcome from my side. I think, you know, Joel's presentation is one thing that gives me hope. It's fantastic things that are happening in the African continent, and I always appreciate him highlighting this. But we also need a reality check, and if I could get my slides up here also for you to see is we are burning more fossil fuels than ever. In the last 10 years, the share of fossil fuels in total final energy consumption has pretty much remained the same, but we use more energy. So that means that actually we are burning more fossil fuels than ever. Okay, the share of renewables has increased slightly from 8.7% to 11.2% in the last 10 years, but it's clearly not enough. There has barely been any change over the last decade, so we need more action. And if we switch to the next slide, you know, one thing that also struck me when Joel was speaking about the advancement is that he was highlighting the power sector. And I think this is, if we hear about renewables, we always hear about these record installations of renewables, the great advancements that have happened in renewable energy, but the majority of this is indeed in the power sector, where renewables are also the strongest. But we use most of our energy in heating, cooling, and transport, and that's where renewables are lagging behind. So I think there's really a need to broaden the discussion, not only make it about a transition in the power sector, but make it a really system-wide renewable energy transformation. And I think, you know, and this is why it's also fantastic to be here and have these different perspectives, is because we need a variety of different stakeholders and people in order to make this transition also happening in all sectors. Joel mentioned cities already briefly. If we look at heating and cooling, half of that demand comes from buildings. Most buildings are located in and around cities. There's the need for localized and decentralized solutions here. So there is a need to work together with city governments. And if we look at the transport sector, again, a large share of energy demand comes from urban transport. And here, city governments have a great role in advancing, on the one hand, alternative, more sustainable modes of transport, more active modes of transport, but also to be these front runners and shift to renewable-based municipal fleets and public transport. And apart from cities, there's, of course, also the need to work with other stakeholders and citizens in the private sector, to work together with national governments and international organizations. And I think if we all work together, we can get there. Back to you, Laura.
Thank you, Leah. So, Lawrence, I'm going to turn to you next, because Leah was speaking very much what she saw from the city's perspective and the role that cities and the need to move beyond the power sector. As a parliamentarian, seeing the presentation, was there, what struck you, or what did you feel was either well represented or perhaps was missing in the overview?
Thank you very much. Once again, my name is Biika Lawrence Songa, Member of Parliament in Uganda and Chair of the Climate Change Committee in Parliament. I'm also a member of the Global Renewable Congress. From the presentation, I think the issue of capacity building is very important, that because in most African countries, we still need to strengthen our capacity as far as renewable management and even installation, even after-sale services are needed in rural areas. So the issue of capacity building is very important. The issue of backup power, that's why I still support the idea of energy mix, so that if one source is affected by climate change, maybe impact, there can still be alternative source of power. So the energy mix issue is very important. In most African countries, you find people have generated power, but they are not yet connected the population. So the issue of distribution, transmission, that is really very striking. But there are gaps which I still feel can also can be closed by this proposal. One is the issue of, in cities, we need to turn waste to energy, because most cities have generating a lot of waste, but we need to turn that into energy in line with the Paris agreement. But also we need some policy support. In most countries, you find policies are lacking in areas of promoting maybe wind energy, so we need that policy framework in place. But also new ideas like the green building, we still need to promote that in most African countries. If we do that, we are hopeful that renewables, which is the future of the world, will be able to power the whole world economy. Because if you look at the NDCs, the nationally determined contributions of most countries under the Paris Agreement, 90% is talking about adaptation. Of the 90% adaptation, again, 90% is talking about renewable energy. So all efforts in capacity, resources, negotiating good terms for the investments will help a lot to build a powerful, renewable, low-carbon economy in Africa.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Yeah.
And you touched on one thing which leads very well over to Samia here. You were talking about the future and the future populations and how do we grow our countries and our economies, and that leads directly to the young professionals, the youth. So Samia, in the presentation that Joel gave, what sort of resonated with you, or what did you feel maybe is something that you can bring that was not presented there?
Oh, okay, thank you so much. And thank you for the nice presentation. I will take it from the top, from the question itself, like what it takes to have a sustainable cities in Africa with affordable access to energy. I think this question is really critical, and it has been asked many times over the year. And at the youth, I will say that the results and the things that, the action that has been done until this moment are not sufficient. So my answer to that will say that we still have a lot to go, and we still have a lot of planning, take it from either from top to bottom or from bottom to top. So it's really complicated. So I'm back into the figures that our colleague was saying, that I will try to make it more simple, that the energy access rate in Africa at this moment is between 40 to 50%. And there is above 60% of the African population, they rely totally on the fossil fuel and on the biomass in their daily activity. So saying that, imagine the effort that needs to be done. And now with the negotiation going on and everything, I think now the eye of the whole continent is on the negotiation output of the loss and damage and the mitigation, and I will see also the for sure the Article 6, because it's all about the energy and when I say like energy and talking about Africa here, I would say I would rather prefer using the energy poverty terminology. And as my colleague here was saying, that now Africa in the negotiation, they are focusing the most on the adaptation. Meanwhile, forgetting that the mitigation side, because now, Africa is responsible for just 4% of the emissions that happening in this world. And at the same time, my colleague was just saying that Africa is getting just 2% of the finance. So here we see the injustice. Like, so that wise, like the loss and damage is a very critical at this point. And yeah, just like to sum up, I would say, like, because I will not talk from like a policymaker perspective, because I will say the things that I see the youth can do it. So basically, I would say that we should enhance the community awareness and engagement in the solution, because most of the people say like, oh, the thermal or the geothermal is the solution, But deep down, do you think that this technology will fit the people over there? So this is the question. And the second thing is I feel is very important at this stage is building a pressure looping institutions that can monitor this result of negotiation and exactly can articulate where we are. And the last thing is reforming and forming the PPA that was my colleague was speaking about, the public-private partnership, because definitely, obviously, we can see that the public institutions, by their own, they cannot go forward. So we need a well-prepared, a well-written, let us say, or articulated law for the PPP and as well for the PPA, the Power Purchasement Agreement. So yeah, I think this is from my side.
Well, you touched on a couple of things there that I'd actually now like to push back to Lawrence. We were talking about solutions. And I know that Uganda has been quite a leader in coming up with various innovative ways and solutions. So, speaking about here, the fact that the finance is not there, the fact that there is such a great potential, that there is this need to make sure that we have a good energy mix, we need to work together. What are some examples from the work that you've been doing as a parliamentarian at the national government that have, sort of been inspiring examples that we can share here?
Yeah, thank you very much. Uganda has developed the National Development Plan for the economy, and in the National Development Plan, there are priorities. Priority number 1 is on energy, and 90%, like I said, is on renewable. But we have also put in place the legal frameworks to support this. We have the Renewable Energy Policy. We have the National Environment Management Act in place and policy. We have the Climate Change Policy and also Climate Change Act now. So we have actually put the legal framework in place for the enabling environment for this investment in renewable energy to power the economy. That is one thing. There is also political will. Any support from the government, from the leadership is really being seen, and it is supporting the quest for renewable. But also we are making the investment climate friendly so that private sector can get involved in promoting renewable in Africa and in Uganda. And these are some of the examples that are really good for us. But also within the law, we have also made the government to see that the first money to invest in renewable must come from our budget. And then the external people can supplement that budget. Once you put it as a priority, then every year you have to put money for investment. In the law, actually, we have put, unless the ministries, departments, and agencies have put substantial amount of money in the budget will not pass. So, and there must be a certificate certifying that there is substantial amount of money put in the budget to address climate change, of course, through many actions, but also promoting renewable energy in the country.
So very much leading by example.
Exactly.
I saw, Leah, that you sort of raised your hand when Lawrence was speaking. Do you want to build on that?
What you already mentioned in your first intervention, I think there's one thing that we haven't really mentioned in this discussion yet is that the continent also has a vast renewable energy potential for a variety of for a variety of different technologies. And when you speak about the mix, just to also highlight, there is this potential to implement these technologies. And one other thing, which of course we need to address is that at the same time, in the African continent, but also around the world, there's still millions of people who don't have access to electricity. So how can we ensure that we improve electricity access and energy access? We have better solutions for clean cooking, and how can we do this sustainably? And I think here one thing that I really want to highlight is that the cost of renewables have significantly decreased. I mean, you've just mentioned, leading by example, the Ugandan government leading by example, which also means putting the business case right? Of showcasing that renewables is a good investment. It is a good long-term investment. It's not something that is anymore seen as a unsecure investment. And just to also say that in most countries in the world, renewables are now the most cost-effective option when you put in new capacity. And I think that's also, comes back to the question of electricity access, as we also need new capacity on the continent. And I think renewables can really be that option and also very cost-effective option there. And at the same time, me coming again and from the city's perspective, rapid urbanization, population growth means cities will be growing. So I think there's also this need and this opportunity to have more sustainable urban development and thinking about the buildings of the future. How do we want these buildings to look like? And can we already think about improving, transport systems in the cities that are growing? I'll stop here.
Do you have an example? So, you've just talked about the rapid urbanization and really putting the business case and, showing that renewables are the sound, the rational, the sensible option. But can you give an example of something that's been very successful at the city level?
I think, Joelle, and thanks for that question, Laura. I mean, Joelle mentioned already, gave a quick overview, and maybe just to take a step back and mention, we had this year, in March, we published the Renewables in Cities Global Status Report. We had a specific feature in cities in sub-Saharan Africa because we believed it was really important to show what's happening on the ground, but also the opportunity for sustainable cities in sub-Saharan Africa. So I'm happy to draw on some of these case studies that we presented there, and I think it's also really important to have these case studies as inspiration. I think what really inspired me is, for example, Yaoundé, who has now really put in this program to have more solar street lights, but also solar kits specifically for disadvantaged households. So again, when this question comes in of how do we make this energy transition more affordable, then we have Dakar, who plans to be net zero by 2050, and really launched a massive mobility and urban planning strategy, and has also this plan to equip half of its municipal buildings with distributed renewables. And also here, which I think I'm happy to pick up later on in the discussion, one of the big drivers here is not only tackling climate change, but improving air, tackling air pollution. And I always think this is, can be our biggest ally in this change to renewables, is really addressing the air pollution question and making people care about air pollution as well.
Yeah, well, especially since, the new WHO guidelines, what you're finding on air quality are much stronger than the guidelines you're finding in many NDCs. So if we're actually adhering to air quality guidelines, we will by default improve the greenhouse gas emissions. You wanted to add something?
Add something on the air pollution issue. Yes, I think on many occasions I've been talking about the high mortality of mothers and children under 5 because of indoor air pollution due to cooking with firewood and charcoal in poorly ventilated kitchens. And this is really causing a lot of health risk to the mothers and children under 5. And then for lighting at night, because the babies, of course, they need the light sometimes, so they are still burning kerosene, and that is also a problem. So we are urging partners, development partners, civil society, private sector, and government to really give solar lightings so that we do away with kerosene, and that will really reduce the mortality of mothers and children under 5, because mortality is being caused by lack of clean energy for cooking and lighting, but also issues to do with water, sanitation, hygiene, nutrition. And if this can be addressed, I think we shall now be a healthy population that can now promote sustainable renewable energy.
That it's more than just renewables is more than the energy. It's the additionality. It's what it can also bring by providing those energy services.
Yeah, exactly, because this thing has implication. The moment you have a household with sick people, and moreover, farming, the smallholder farmers in Africa, in Uganda, 80% are women. So if a kid is sick, definitely will be maybe in the hospital, and it is the mother who is a farmer is now taking care of this kid, and no one is doing agriculture. How can you promote nutrition? How can you promote agro-based industries when the production is low? Though this is a very, very big challenge. And also the money they have saved from the previous sale of harvest is spent all on medical bills, so that economy cannot grow. And from hospital, they want to recover, get some livelihood support. The immediate thing is to cut trees for charcoal and firewood because agriculture is failed because of drought. So we really need to balance that so that the future of renewable energy can really be bright. Yeah, yeah.
I think the energy access issue is a huge issue, and it's a very important one. But I think we also need to move beyond. We need to ensure energy access, but we also need to move beyond that discussion, particularly on the African continent, where it's much more than a clean cook stove, 2 lights, and a cell phone charger. That is important, but there's also just the huge potential that renewables can bring for innovation, for industrialization, for jobs, the larger picture. But I just wanted to turn to you, Samir. What, some example, can you give us an example from your perspective, the work that you've been doing that sort of illustrates the positive role, the driving role of renewables?
Yeah, okay. I worked in many renewable energy projects in Yemen, in Egypt, and in Sudan. So basically, the thematic areas of these jobs were so different from country to another, because yeah, the African continent is really huge, and the geopolitical situation and the economic situation as well is so different from country to country. So I think that I will pick the example of Egypt, where I was working in a project called Our Industry. Basically, we were focusing on the energy efficiency for the small and medium enterprises over there. So we were providing them by law, because the Egyptian government was so supportive for this project. And this project was like a strategic project, because they have like a plan that by 2030 they will increase the tariff of the electricity. So they cannot do this just rapidly. So these things has to be systematically. So they were trying fiercely to, or we were trying fiercely in this project to make awareness for the business owner, so they know what's the energy efficiency, what's the energy auditing, and how to get alliances for your industry to be clean. So that was one of the amazing projects. And in some industries, one of the successful stories that we were able to reduce the energy, the consumption of energy by 6%. So 6%. So imagine. Because sometimes, like, yeah, we do audit the appliances, but we do another thing that, if, for instance, for the food industries, we can generate a fuel from the waste. So it's like recycling. And instead of having waste, so now we will be having a zero waste, and we will save the energy. And by 2030, that I think they will be like, they can compact and they can cope with this new energy tariff. And at the same time, they will create a new job, like, because now they are creating a market for the renewable energy auditing, and they will not have to flee or like reduce the workforce of the industries because of the higher because of the higher cost of the electricity. So yeah.
So so now I'm going to play devil's advocate, because we talk. I think it's really important that we hear about what works and what and we exchange on experiences, like what Leah was talking about with cities, or in the parliamentarians really exchanging about what's going on. What didn't work and why? Because I'm curious, because I think sometimes, you know, we have these projects, but they can't be 100% perfect. Oftentimes, some people are missing from the conversation. So just building on this particular project you're talking about, you know, who was missing? Did you feel, if you look back on the project?
I don't think that in this particular project they were like a missing stakeholder, because we were making sure that every stakeholder is involved over there. So we work with the academic sector, the researcher, with the government, the public sector, and with the private sector. So yeah, basically there were no one missing there. But generally, according to my experience, that the stakeholders that are missing the most are the beneficiaries themselves. Because as I have said earlier, that maybe you will say that the solar cook are the best solution for this community.
Solar cookers.
Yeah, the solar cookers. But maybe they want things that they can help them to use their time in other things, because the solar cooker they take usually a lot of time to, I don't know, to prepare the food and all that. So maybe for some community, this is not the best technology for them. So we have like whenever we are designing for any solution, we have to make sure that the community is involved. Otherwise, maybe they will just like, yeah, you will do the whole supply chain things and you will invest, but at the end of the day, no one will come and buy your product. So this is the most important thing for me.
Lawrence, you want to, yeah.
Yeah, definitely there are some gaps as we do this thing, even in Uganda. Much as we want to promote renewable, but sometimes it is not benefiting people 100% because of the high cost for the beneficiaries. That is one. And number two is also, the high cost is also coming because of sometimes poor negotiation at the time of investment. Once you negotiate a very high tariffs, definitely the population will see that you have the generation, but they cannot use that power. But also there is the issue of energy efficiency, which we still need to really sensitize the population how they can efficiently use this energy to cut costs down. So these are still challenges that are remaining there. And then we are also talking about this thing of mini and off-grid. They are not yet well spread. And also we have to attract more investment in that area. But also in Uganda, maybe one thing which is trying to solve that power issue that we generate and we are not using is to build the industrial parks. We have now put industrial parks in all regions of Uganda, and we think they can absorb the power we are generating, create green jobs, moreover from renewable, and in that way, because we don't need power for lighting. We don't need power for lighting only. We need power for industrial development, and that power must be strong, reliable, and cheap. So that's what we are really trying to do in Uganda. Of course, like my colleague is talking about, sometimes acceptability of that renewable energy. Some people have cultural tie that if I cook with firewood, the food is sweeter than when I cook with solar or something like that. That can be solved through sensitization and so on. But one big challenge again is, like Uganda, we have prioritized hydropower. The watershed need to be intact. If we destroy the forest, the hydropower is not going to help us. Moreover, we are borrowing money at high interest rate to build these power dams. At the end, we shall pay for power for the hydropower equipments which are not helping the economy. So when we are building dams, we need alternative livelihoods for the adjacent population, because if we don't do that, they will continue cutting firewood for charcoal and maybe poles, and then they will affect the watershed. At the end, the turbines will not run because there will be no water. So we need that alternative to help the people who are living in the watershed of those rivers where we are putting power. Yes.
Did you want to comment on that, Samia? Yeah. just quickly. Yeah?
Yes, okay. Just like I want to comment on his first point that the high cost of the technologies over there. That's why I said most of the time that the beneficiaries, they are missed from all this calculation. So in Sudan, with the higher Council of Environment and Natural Resources, now we are working on a project called community mapping. So in this community mapping, what we are trying to do basically is going to the community, and as I've said earlier, that the economic situation is very it varies from state to state. So we'll go to that state, and we make the analysis over the GDP per capita for the GDP per capita for that exact state. So by doing that, I can know the best financing mechanism that suits those people, because I cannot just as I've said, making a product that they cannot afford it. So studying the socioeconomic situation of the people are very important, and I think it's one of the tools that we can mitigate the higher cost of the renewable or clean energy. Yeah.
Leah, from a city's perspective, I mean, you commented on the fact that you had these case studies of, really of inspiring examples of action. Any lessons learned from that? Things that the people, voices that were missing, and maybe why they were missing?
I think, and it's something that both the other panelists have already mentioned, is the finance sector is often missing. Also, when we look at the city level, I've been speaking with some cities, and they're like, we have these really cool projects that we want to realize, but we don't know how to finance them. We don't know how to get the money. I mean, renewable energy projects, they cost money up front. They will pay back, but of course there needs to be somebody who finances them. And then from a city perspective, I think this question of access to money is a really big one, because how, a city has the money in its budget, but let's be honest, I mean, not every city has such a big budget that they can easily, put up massive installations within their city boundaries and finance them. And then the question is, okay, how can they access the financial markets? And here, one of the big problems is that cities often cannot access neither national financial markets, and let's not even speak about international financial markets. So I think here, again, something that we've been speaking about is there is this need to have these collaborations with the private sector, cities working alongside with the national governments to really to finance these projects on the ground. Plus, again, as Lawrence, you were saying, this business case. If you want to have private finance, often they're reluctant. If it hasn't been done before, then they want to have hard data that this is going to work. Okay, what is your consumption? What is your projected consumption? And many cities don't have the data because it's incredibly difficult to collect data on, how much is even the energy consumption of municipal operations, not even to speak about of the entire citywide population, all the businesses and everybody operating in that city. And then also, from my perspective, speaking with a lot of cities is, also something I mentioned in the beginning, we keep speaking about renewable electricity. And I think here, when speaking with cities, I realize often cities are like, oh yeah, we have energy projects, energy. And I'm like, but you mean electricity? And they're like, but that's the same. I'm like, no, it's not. Electricity is, electricity and energy is not the same. And I think it's being conflated. And they sometimes then don't realize, okay, but what is the rest then? I mean, I don't understand. So that's why the slide that I showed beforehand, whenever I showed that slide, it was like, oh, interesting. Oh, okay, that's what energy is, all these sectors. And I think that's also, as a big point about raising awareness and thinking then about the different entry points in order to make that transition happening.
So I just want to come back to you, Lawrence. Leah was talking about the challenge that cities have in access to financing. Mm-hmm. Is this a role where we can see better cooperation from the national level down to the city level? Is there a role at the national level, at the political level, to be able to build in or to support that financing component to help cities realize it? Because cities in a way have a level of independence that maybe the national government doesn't. The national government may have a mandate, but city governments are much more on the ground, the day-to-day functioning, and very much in contact with their citizens. So is that something that's being investigated about how to create a binôme, a pairing between what the national government can bring from the financing side and the cities?
Yeah. Thank you very much. In Uganda, what we have done, we have the Uganda Development Bank, and then we have recapitalized the bank so that people who want to invest in many things, but including renewable energy, can access local funds at low interest. So that's one initiative, and we have a legal framework along that line so that it can encourage private sector that is interested in investing in renewable energy and also other businesses to access that fund at low interest rate. So that's one initiative, and it is supported by policies and laws, yes.
And what has been are cities engaging? Are cities able
yes,
to really...
first of all, the cities have cooperation among them. They have an association that brings all the cities together, but that is in Uganda. But still, as far as renewable energy is concerned, we cannot talk of a model city in Uganda. But if this information, this idea can be supported, I think training cities with the model city that is promoting renewable, like if you go to, for example, Mazda City in Abu Dhabi, you will see that they're doing some good work there. But if we can train some of these upcoming cities so that they can cooperate, so that they don't spend a lot of money on research again, but they can learn from each other, I think that will be very good for the economy, yes.
Okay, do you want to, go ahead.
Share one case of where what I found really inspiring is looking at Cape Town and what they've done to put in, installing solar PV on municipal buildings and also putting up the guidelines and tariffs and safety installation guidelines for solar PV citywide. And what was interesting, exactly what you just spoke about, Lawrence, is more than 40 other municipalities in South Africa then picked up and were inspired by Cape Town and picked up similar guidelines and developed similar guidelines for what's happening in their city. Because I think it's also about this peer-to-peer exchange, like learning from cities that are in a similar situation. So just wanted to share a good example of action.
Great. I'm going to turn to the audience here because I realized that I was a little bit negligent in my role as moderator. As a participant, you are more than welcome to submit questions to our panelists. There's a little screen down here at my feet that I can sort of see. I cleaned my glasses before we came. So if you do have any questions, to Lawrence or Leah or Samia, or even on the topic that we're addressing, or if you feel that there's something we're not addressing that you feel fits into this topic about how are we going to build back better, please pop it in the chat channel. It'll pop up on the screen down here. I will look at it, I'll read it out, and if I can't read it, I know someone in the room back here, all these tech people, someone will hold it up on a piece of paper. So please, if you're interested, please pop something in the chat channel. So while people are getting up their courage to ask a question, I'm going to ask another one. How do we ensure that cities and countries benefit from this transition? So we've talked about renewables. We've talked about the potential of renewables. Leah has shown a little bit of a disconnect, that there is an uptake of renewables, but it needs to be better, it needs to be stronger. We've seen from Joelle the great uptake of renewable power in the continent. We've heard from you, Lawrence, about what's happening in Uganda, the need for an energy mix and infrastructure development. But what is it that we can do to really ensure that the cities and the countries across the African continent really benefit from this renewable energy transition? Yeah, and I'd like you to go first.
One thing is we need to really remove disputes in our priorities. One country wants to put hydropower and in a shared maybe river, and then it brings conflict with the neighbor. So first thing, we need to really streamline our priorities and see that renewable energy is good for Africa. So that if one country has prioritized hydropower and it is on a shared resource, maybe River Nile or any other river, Niger and so on, there should be the basin-wide agreement that we are going to develop hydropower along this river so that we can power our economy. So these trade disputes need to be removed if countries are supposed to adopt this renewable, because most of them will come from hydro and then solar. And then we also need to promote sequestration, that is creating more carbon sinks in Africa so that really all countries, all cities can move towards the net zero. Whatever is produced, the greenhouse gas emission generated is absorbed all by these trees we are planting, or trees that are natural but are conserved. I think that will help. But also we can do carbon trading that can generate money for investment in renewables. But that will require us to measure, verify, and report on the amount of carbon greenhouse gases being absorbed by our forests and our watershed and so on. So we need technical support in the area of measurement, verification, and reporting. And we need, once we have quantified our carbon sink, then we need to negotiate better terms. During COPs like this, bilateral, we need to negotiate better price because population is growing. Now, when population is growing, there is no way you are going to say, on my 5 acres of land, 3 acres should be put under carbon sink, and I remain with 2. For me to leave the trees to stay on my 3 acres for 30 years to absorb carbon dioxide, then you pay me better money for 1 kilogram or 1 ton of carbon absorbed so that I can use that money for creating other green jobs or off-farm employment or income-generating initiatives. Yeah.
So when I was hearing what you were saying, sort of a theme, part of that was the concept of cooperation.
Yes.
So the cooperation across river basins, but also just the cooperation with regards to the space and the carbon sinks and,
Yes.
and how we sort of negotiate
Yes.
how we maintain those.
Yeah.
For you, Samia, how do you think we can ensure that sort of cities or countries or maybe the growing population of Africa can really benefit from this energy transition?
Okay, I will answer this as the youth. Yeah. I just think that the youth should be like a key player in all this level, starting from the civic engagement until the public management and all that. And I will paraphrase what my colleague have just said, that having this continental plan or image, because the conflict over resources, the conflict over resources in Africa, they are really high. So as we have like, yes, external pressure, but we do have like our internal issues. So it's better to work on resolving the 2 issues at the same time.
So having it as sort of like I don't know what you'd call it, instead of sort of the linear, really looking at it from a systemic approach, yes. Really looking at the issue from all these various perspectives. Leah, again, sort of, from the city perspective, what do you?
I think I'm going to pick up on something that Lawrence already mentioned before, is, we've been discussing, maybe here at COP, we discuss about tackling climate change and, of course, renewables as an opportunity to mitigate climate change. But I think it's always really important to broaden that discussion and think about, okay, it's not only, yes, fantastic renewables for tackling climate change, that's really important, but what are some of the other co-benefits of renewable energy? And, Lawrence, you spoke beforehand about indoor air pollution being a problem. And, Laura, you mentioned the WHO guidelines. And I actually think, if we speak about air pollution now, to complement what you said, Lawrence, the outdoor air pollution is also a massive issue. We've had, I think now the study came out that we've vastly underestimated the impact of outdoor air pollution. And I think similar to indoor air pollution, there's no person on this planet who says, "Oh, I love air pollution. I love, I love having my kids and grandkids being subject to air pollution." So I think that's really a lever that we need to use and think about. Okay, renewables can also support us in having this cleaner air for our families, for our friends, and really having these better, cleaner, and healthier living environments. And then, Samia, you mentioned about the youth, and I think here, like the local jobs component is a really important one. Renewables have an opportunity to provide these local jobs on the ground, specifically when we look at more decentralized solutions. We really need the skill base in cities, but everywhere in countries. So to put these up, to maintain a more decentralized renewable energy systems, that of course also requires people who are trained, skilling the workforce, getting young people into these employments, but also thinking about how people who have worked in more traditional, conventional energy jobs, how can we get them to shift more to more renewable energy jobs? So we also have this just transition aspect that we need to take into consideration. And I think as a last thing is, and I'd love to hear some other perspectives on this, is the energy security aspect. Many countries around the world are very dependent on energy imports, and renewable energy has this opportunity to generate more energy locally, and thus also reduce the dependence on volatile prices. I mean, we've now heard about the gas price spikes, and also to really play into this more energy security aspects.
Well, that's a perfect segue, because one of the things we did before this event was we consulted with our community, the broader community that our organizations span, and asked, what does renewable energy mean for you? When you hear renewable energy, what does it mean? And so we created a word cloud that came with all the words that came in when we asked people. And it was really interesting what came out of this. So what I'm going to do is we're going to put it up here. Hopefully everybody can see it. And I'm really curious to see what your response as the panelists and as the audience, again, if you have a question or if you see something on this word cloud and you think, hey, that doesn't make sense, or wait a minute, I think something's missing, put it in the chat channel so that we can include it in our conversation. So here we have, this was the question we asked, what do renewables mean to you? This is what came back. Really diverse. Some of them were, of course, more dominant than others, but we decided to be equitable and give everything the same value, so as not to prejudice the conversation here. So, Samia, here's the word cloud. A reaction, a thought, something that catches your eye, or maybe something that's missing when you think about renewables.
Yeah, like when I see all these words, I think they are all connected, and maybe just like I'm looking for a word or two words that can describe this. So I might say like the core that drives the universe, or I don't know, something like that, because like the core, like renewable energy is
the core.
The core, yeah, that drives the universe. So yeah.
So it's a fundamental core to who we are and how we exist.
Yeah.
Okay, Lawrence.
I see many things, but they're all related. So what, to me, I would really want us to narrow that we can group the various definitions so that we have fewer but condensed, so that because they're all related to me and they look too many, but if we can only group them in a thematic area, I think that will help us to create that awareness to the population.
Leah?
I, of course, see some of the words that start with C, so cities, citizens, and community are the ones that spring out at me, and I think it's just by coincidence that they all start with a C. And I think, just to tie them together, I think, cities, the city governments have, they're very close to their citizens. They have this opportunity to engage with them. Samia spoke about community, the importance of getting people on board, of really building these communities of people who are active in the energy transition. Also see this as an opportunity to build stronger citizenship around the energy transition. And I see lots of this coming together in cities.
Yeah, a big city proponent. Yeah, promotion there for cities. I mean, I think when I see this, what I found fascinating with this, and I agree with you, Lawrence, it's a bit overwhelming, but I think what it really says is that renewable energy is so much more than just energy, right? It is about how renewable energy can support broader societal objectives. How do we ensure energy security, whether that be security of energy supply, for example, but also personal security, with safe lighting, for example. The fact that, as you mentioned earlier, the issue of agriculture, that if you have your farmer who is not able to work because of illness, whether in the household, that then ties into agriculture, and so the provision of energy not only for the production or the transformation of an agricultural product, but also the ability to even engage in that activity. Renewables can support that. And what was also I found reassuring seeing this word cloud is that we've moved away from renewable energy being sort of an ad hoc something to do on the side. Yes, we need to have centralized power. We have base load, fossil fuel, and that renewables is just sort of there in case, or it's a nice backup, or you have it when the grid goes down. Whereas here, we're really starting to see that it's actually, it is front and center, and that's where it really needs to be. But I'm keeping an eye on time here. We've got a little bit more time left. Any last thoughts?
Can I add that one more?
Yeah, go for it. What?
I think I'm taking this from your words right now. So it's all about livelihood. So I think maybe because all the time I try to narrow down things and come up with the terminology or a word that can conclude everything. So it's when I see markets, communication, governance, technology, all these things, they have one goal, that is to level up the livelihood of the communities and of everyone that's living here today. So yeah, livelihood.
Nicely phrased. Okay. So.
Yeah, maybe what I can say is we all need to take our actions, small actions, which can have a global positive impact. Even if you plant one tree, even if you develop the use of solar lamps, even if you reduce waste in the community, energy-saving technologies, let us take our small actions to bring big positive changes in the world. But also important is the issue of cooperation and working together, involving government, private sector, civil society, academia. Of course, the young people, women and children will be very, very important, because these are the users, the beneficiaries of this, what we want to promote. And also, we want to encourage that financing mechanisms should be in place, and that financing should be not having a long bureaucracy, so that people can access cheap funds, which are not high interest, to invest in mini or off-grid, which can benefit many communities, and they conserve the natural resources. This will really help us to power the economy of Africa, of many developing world, from renewables. I think that is really what I would encourage. Yeah.
Who would like to build on that? Leah, go for it.
I'm going to build on what also Samia, what you just said, the word livelihood missing there. I think that's actually front and center. I mean, in the end, what are we speaking about? We're speaking about sustainable, healthy living environments for everybody. And that's what it should be about. And how do we get there, and seeing renewable energy as an opportunity to make this happen? Because in the end, it's about people. And I think, sometimes also, sometimes we forget about this. It's, policies are a mean to get there, and finance is a mean to get there. But in the end, it's about good, healthy living environments and good, healthy lives. And I think we all get really inspired being here and hearing lots of options and actions. And as somebody said, we know, there's so many opportunities, there's so much to do. We have the technologies, we have the business case. Let's get to action on Monday after the weekend. Bit of sleep.
Samia, final thoughts.
Final thought is just like my colleagues have just said it. We need actions, even if it's a small action. Just like start with yourself, with your small community, because obviously that the bureaucracy of this, of the political world is really hard, and things are going so slow over there. So within your community, within yourself, just do the things that really can help in mitigating this climate crisis.
Okay, words of action. I think if I'm to sort of, it's always difficult to summarize a really diverse discussion, and we've had definitely very different. I would say different, but complementary perspectives. And I think from what I'm taking away from this discussion is that it's really important. We need to find the points of agreement. There will always be points of disagreement, but if we can find our points of agreement and commit to working together, we can then figure out how are we going to overcome, where are we going to, what are the priorities, and how can we then bring these together in a systemic way to really push energy transition that's built on, or I should say an energy system that's built on energy efficiency, renewable energy that really drives a sustainable economy. And I think it's fair to say that we have the technological know-how. And what we really have to work on, and you alluded to this, Lawrence, is we need to have the political buy-in. We also need the societal buy-in, which we're seeing, with the citizens and at the cities, and that those together can really help drive the energy transition. Lawrence.
Yeah, just to come back, we need to fulfill our promises. Every year we are talking about, during the COP, we are talking about the pledge, raising ambition, but where is this, when are we going to fulfill this pledge? We agreed, of course there are disagreements, but we agreed that we are going to raise $100 billion every year so that we can invest in some of this renewable energy to address climate change. But where is the money? Why is it difficult to access the money? So these are the things we agreed upon. For how long are we going to continue every COP talking about raising ambition, promoting renewable? We need action now.
Absolutely.
Yes.
We need to move from the ambition to the reality, and how do we move that, and how do we measure that? And actually one of the things that is being discussed is, can we use renewables, the installed capacity of renewables, as a key performance indicator, so that we're integrating it, the share of renewables, we're integrating it as an economic indicator. How much in our processes, in what we're developing, do we really, how much of that is being covered by renewables, as a way of measuring that progression? Because I think what is sometimes so frustrating is as you've just said, Lawrence, we have this ambition, and then we have the reality, and we're almost frozen by how do we actually move, and how do we actually realize that action. And so yes, action is what is needed. We need to stop talking and start start doing. There, yep, there we go.
Yeah, and you know, in this we have agreed under the UNFCCC that we shall have common but differentiated responsibility. We are not saying you should copy exactly how Egypt is doing it, but we are saying, yes, we have common but differentiated responsibility. Each country should do what we are talking about in the local context of the country, considering the economy and level of development, but moving along the same line, so that at a certain point, of course, the targets will be different. At a certain point, we can say now, we are going to achieve our net zero by 2030, net zero by 2050, but in the local context of the economy of the country.
Yes.
Yes.
Here, here. I think we would all
Yes.
we would all agree with that. We don't all like to wear the same shoes, right? We don't like to all wear the same coats. That we all have differentiated approaches and needs. So yes, absolutely. So I'm going to start wrapping up here. I want to, I think what I really take from this session, and I hope you as our participants have, is the fact that renewables is more than just power. Renewables can meet both our lighting, heating, transport needs, that we really need to move beyond where we're on a good track with regards to renewables, but we need to do more, and we need to do more now. That renewables is more about than just the provision of energy services, that renewables can really support a lot of broader societal goals such as clean air, access to innovation, driving innovation, economic development, jobs. I mean, going back to our word cloud, security, both personal and energy security. And I think it's ultimately, it's about the societal change that we need to make. We have the technological know-how, we need to have the political acceptance, we need the societal acceptance, and bringing those together, I think, can really, really drive the transition so that we have an energy efficient and a renewable energy based economy that gives us that equitable, healthy society that we all have a right for. So I would like to thank my panelists. Thank you very much, Honorable Lawrence. I'll just call you Honorable Lawrence. Samia and Leah, also thank you very much to World Future Council, our colleague Anna Skorun, excuse me, Anna, as well as Joel Nana and Yachita Reddy at SCA Africa. Thank you very much for all your input today, being here. Thank you, audience, for joining us. And hopefully we've given you a lot of food for thought. And we'll see you either in the corridors elsewhere or at other activities leading to this society that we want to see. Thank you very much.